Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Evidently. Evidently is the clinical data intelligence platform built to help physicians harness the ocean of patient data they're drowning in every day. From chart summarization to AI-assisted note drafting and denial appeal support, Evidently makes sure the right data shows up at the right time. Physicians using Evidently report spending less time hunting through charts and more time focusing on patient care. That's why they've become a trusted partner to health systems looking to improve documentation, quality, and revenue sustainability. The company is led by providers and AI researchers that are dedicated to reducing documentation burden and helping clinicians practice at the top of their license. If you want to see what Evidently can do for your hospital or your practice, reach out today at www.evidently.com. Now, let's get into today's episode. Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our newest How I Doctor sponsor, Savaro. Savaro is a top telestroke and neurology company that was built to fix one of the most predictable failures in modern medicine, getting timely, consistent access to a neurologist when you actually need one. Their team of board-certified neurologists deliver rapid video response, clear decision-making support, and continuity from the first exam all the way through treatment planning and management. Hospitals working with Savaro see faster door-to-needle times, fewer transfers, and measurable improvements in patient outcomes. And because Savaro was built by physicians, the workflows actually match real-world medicine. If you need stronger, faster, and more predictable neurology coverage, visit savaro.com to learn more. And now, let's get into today's episode.
The foundation has a vision of a world where seeking mental health care is universally viewed as a sign of strength for healthcare workers, and where the environment of providing care makes things better, not worse. So everything we do is working towards that vision, and we do it in really three verticals. The first is advocacy. The second vertical is in advancing collaboration. At an individual level, we have an ambassador group of over 400 strong individuals who care about this and want to help move the work forward. Healthcare workers, researchers, leaders. And then the third vertical is this accelerating the adoption of best practices.
Welcome to How I Doctor, where we're bringing joy back to medicine. My guest today is another incredible emergency physician, Dr. Steph Simmons. Dr. Simmons is Chief Medical Officer of the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation and practices in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Today, we're going to talk about a taboo subject among physicians that I think is hopefully starting to become less taboo: mental health and physician suicide. I'm actually the odd man out in my family. My mom, my dad, my brother all have or had careers in mental health, so it must run in Walker blood. And I, unfortunately, like many physicians, know a physician who died by suicide, my med school classmate, Dr. Stephen Ortiz. Today, Steph and I will talk about Dr. Lorna Breen's legacy, how Dr. Simmons got involved in mental health for medical professionals, where the conversation around mental health in medicine is changing, and how the foundation is making an impact to help physicians like you, me, and Lorna. But before we dig deeper, for any listeners out there, I want to tell you that we know that depression, anxiety, burnout are very common among physicians and other healthcare workers. The three hallmark symptoms of burnout, and you don't have to have all three to qualify: emotional exhaustion, that's feeling drained or anxious or unmotivated. Number 2, depersonalization, feeling detached or negative toward patients or colleagues or work. And number 3, reduced personal accomplishment, a feeling of ineffectiveness or lack of impact. I'll also say that suicidal thoughts are not uncommon among healthcare professionals either. If you need help, if you aren't sure if you maybe need help, you can call or text 988, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or you can call the Physician Support Line at 1-888-409-0141, which is a free and confidential and anonymous line staffed by psychiatrists to help their colleagues. Dr. Steph Simmons, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to How I Doctor.
Thanks, Graham. It's a pleasure to be here.
Steph, like I said, this is such an important topic for me personally, and I think it's something that we don't talk about enough as physicians. Again, thank you for being here. Maybe we can just start with a simple question for physicians who may not be familiar. Who was Dr. Lorna Breen, and why does her story matter so much to medicine today?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Dr. Lorna Breen was an emergency medicine physician. She was the chair of emergency medicine at New York Presbyterian Allen Hospital in Manhattan. And like many people, she was called on to care for her community in the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we all have really visceral memories of what Manhattan looked like in March and April of 2020. Um, and for many people listening, they'll have really profound memories of what it felt to deliver healthcare, right? To be a doctor or nurse during that time. And so, Lorna was working 18-hour days, day after day, taking care of patients, trying to find PPE for her team, trying to make sure they stayed safe, that they could also take care of the people outside of the hospital that were counting on them. And she got COVID-19, and like so many people, came back to work 24 hours after her fever broke and went right back to that grueling schedule. And and when I say grueling schedule, it wasn't just the hours, it was what the hours were filled with, which was uncertainty and fear and risk and death and dying and people dying without their family members there. Lorna became exhausted. So physically exhausted, but also emotionally and intellectually exhausted. And she called her family, who basically evacuated her by car down to Virginia, and she received mental health care. And when she was discharged, she expressed to her family that she was terrified that now that she had received mental health care, she was at risk of losing her license, of losing her hospital credentials, of losing her leadership position. And that was one of the last, conversations that she had with her family before she died. And Lorna died by suicide. About 12 hours after her death, the New York Times published a story about her life and death, against her family's objections. And they had media camping out right in their front lawn. And this story really tapped into what was happening across the country with response to the pandemic and fears that the healthcare workforce had. And first, dozens and then hundreds of healthcare workers reached out to Lorna's family to share that she wasn't
Yeah.
alone, that they shared these concerns. So the foundation was started by Lorna's sister and brother-in-law as a response to all of the outreach from healthcare workers across the country. And at this point, it's been thousands. And yes, to honor her and her legacy, but also to make things better for the folks who are still in it.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I trained in New York. I didn't get the chance to know Lorna, but I'm like 1 degree of separation from her because we all are. Just hearing that description of her, I know that archetype in me. I know that in so many of my friends from residency, my colleagues now. And so the description of what an incredible woman she was, I think shook many of us to our core because we identified so many of those things that we value so much in ourselves, the ability to take on anything as positives in ourselves. I've certainly felt like I saw some of myself in how people talked about Dr. Breen as well.
I did not know Lorna before her death, although when I sort of retrospectively looked, we'd presented at some of the same
Yeah.
conferences, exactly what you said, right?
Yes.
1 degree separation. And I've spoken to many people who did know her and worked with her. And it's exactly what you said, Graham. The overwhelming feeling was this could happen to any of us.
I think every physician knew exactly what Lorna was talking about with the fear of the first fear is like to acknowledge that you need help, right? We're all physicians. We think we're invincible. We think we don't need anyone else's help for anything. And then the fear that it'll get back to the medical board that we now carry a diagnosis of X or Y or Z, and that will, through the medical board or through any of the other regulatory bodies will impact our ability to do this thing that we've like dedicated our lives to. And hopefully that's starting to change. We'll talk about that a little bit more today. But I graduated residency in 2011, but that was like a known thing. If you're going to get therapy, you pay cash, you make sure it's like not affiliated with any other organization. It's very hush hush. I know physicians who like don't want anything documented at all because there's still so much fear that it will impact their ability to practice medicine in the future.
There's really like these two separate decision-making pathways on this issue, right? And one is about stigma.
Yes.
And there's this internal source of stigma, right? What does it mean for me as a healer
Yes.
if I say I might need healing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a big one. And I'll just like anecdotally, I got to tell you, when I finally decided to get help in my home, taking care of my home, like AKA a cleaning service, that was hard. Right? And so it's like, okay, that we have these self images and self beliefs that make it hard to get help with anything. Then there's also external stigma. What are other people going to think about me? And what are my beliefs and fears about that? We just did a survey with the Heart of Safety Coalition, and we asked a bunch of questions, but two of them I want to highlight here. And one was, if you knew that a colleague had received mental health care, would you think about them negatively, neutrally, or positively?
Oh, that's a great question. What a great way to frame it. I love that.
Just so overwhelmingly, people said positively or neutral, like overwhelmingly. Then we asked people, how do you think other people are going to judge you if they knew that you had received mental health care? And it was like between 60 and 70% said negatively.
Yeah.
Right? So there's this disconnect between what we're afraid of and what's actual.
Well, and the standard we'd hold ourselves to versus the grace and the understanding we would give a trusted friend or colleague. Absolutely. My therapist has pointed this out to me many times. A quick word about today's sponsor, Evidently. Their platform turns an ocean of fragmented clinical data into concise, actionable insights. Chart summaries, note drafting, denial appeal support, HCC capture, so you spend time caring, not chasing. A transplant surgeon at a large academic medical center recently took transplant referral review from 2 hours to 20 minutes with AI-assisted chart review from Evidently. Physicians deserve workflows that improve accuracy, reduce exhausting chart biopsy, and help us practice at the top of our license. If you want to see how this might work in your hospital or your department, go to evidently.com. That's evidently.com to get started today. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Savaro. If you've ever waited and waited for a neurologist to call you back, you know the problem that Savaro was built to fix. Savaro is a physician-led telestroke and neurology company that delivers rapid virtual neurology coverage that's reliable. Their board-certified neurologists connect by video in under 45 seconds, and they stay with you through the entire decision-making journey. Hospitals working with Savaro report faster door-to-needle times, fewer unnecessary transfers, and measurable improvements in patient outcomes. If your hospital needs stronger, faster, more consistent neurology coverage, visit Savaro.com to learn more.
But I think it's also important to recognize that the number wasn't zero, right? There's still between 5 to 10% of our colleagues who would judge us negatively if they knew that we received mental health care. And so that's where the question of institutional stigma comes in, which is this third area of stigma. And that's the policies and the procedures that stigmatize mental health care. There's so many ways in which these are stigmatizing. First is the fact that the questions go like this and in this order. Have you been convicted of a felony?
Yeah.
Are you a pedophile? Have you ever received mental health care or a It's like one of these things is not behavioral, right?
Yeah.
Like it's undesirable behavior, undesirable behavior, desirable behavior.
Yeah.
we want people to seek mental health
Yeah.
care. And if you have a mental health condition, we want you to receive diagnosis and treatment. So even the fact that question is there is stigmatizing. The location and its association with other questions is stigmatizing. And then the fact that the question is divorced from impairment, right? So if the purpose of that question was to identify impaired clinicians who may need additional resources or accommodations to do their work, why not ask about that instead? Why not ask, are you currently impaired from your for any reason? And if so, like what accommodations do you need? And so that's the question that we're recommending. And so there's these three areas of stigma, but then there's also in addition to the stigma component of this decision making is an economic model. Where, as you said, like we spent a decade for physicians training to be physicians. It's really difficult to retool our training to do something else. Not impossible,
Yeah.
but really difficult. And not only a decade of sort of sunk cost of time, but also treasure. We need to be able to work, to be able to manage the investment that we've made. You don't go into medicine, and particularly not emergency medicine, because it's the easiest way to make a
Yeah.
buck, right? Like, you go in because you're passionate about helping people, and it becomes part of your identity. So to also put that at risk, like, people make this complex multifactorial decision based on individual, social and institutional stigma and economic decision making. And so what we're working towards at the foundation is like changing some of those factors so that the balance
Yeah.
tips and people can make rational decisions that are also in their best interest.
I've always thought if society is going to help support physicians through, many years of medical school training and residency and fellowship, we should want our physicians to practice as long as we possibly can and support them through what we just both said are some of the most emotionally and challenging scenarios that any human will ever see. We should stop thinking of it as, certainly stop thinking of it as a moral failure or an individual failure, but just like, hey, if you work in healthcare and have to see all the terrible things that happen to innocent human beings every day, that's that's going to have some impact on your brain and your emotion. And how can we support our healthcare workers?
The definition of burnout is an occupational syndrome caused by the imbalance of chronic uncontrolled stress and individual coping. And for years and years and years, the focus has been on increasing individual coping. And there is a limit to that system. So you can you can only work on building a stronger canary so long before you have to fix the coal mine. We do also need to help our healthcare workforce, help our colleagues like build really great coping strategies and boundary setting. That's part of it. There also needs to be this reframing of like, it is professional to have healthy boundaries with your work. But by far, this is about chronic uncontrolled stressors. And so there is as much that needs to be said about systems reform and the environment of care and the systems that incentivize patient care and efficiency and effectiveness. That is as much a part of this in the sort of uncontrolled chronic stress equation of the side as individual mental health, individual coping strategies, or care seeking, sort of once there is a wounded, right,
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
that requires help.
Steph, what progress do you think we've made in the past 5 years? What are we seeing that has changed that we've been able to start to change the way things work?
I want to expand the window a little bit. In 2017, there was a white paper published by the Federation of State Medical Boards the Federation of State Professional Health Programs, about the need for reform in licensing. And this started the change in the state medical licensing community of regulators, where some of the state medical boards eliminated the questions about past mental health history. In 2019, the National Academy of Medicine published the consensus statement on professional well-being in healthcare, and it really focused on um, the systems approach to professional well-being. I went to that launch meeting in October of 2019, and I'll never forget the phrase that we have an epidemic of burnout in healthcare in October of 2019, because of course 3 months later, pandemic, right? And so a couple of things happened early in the pandemic. One thing was that oak door cracked open and people started having real conversations about what was happening to care workers. We also had this almost at the same time as these really human stories about what people were facing, there was this counter narrative of heroism, right? Which has its own problems because you shouldn't have to be a hero to go to work. That conversation started to shift over the next year or two. And in healthcare, it was really a revolution in how our teams worked together.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, I don't know an ER that you could walk into today and recognize, most of the people who worked there 6 years ago. It's just
I mean, I literally, when you said that time period, I literally remember calculating that I think our ED lost like 200 years of ED nursing experience, because a lot of the nurses that I worked with for a decade went to the PACU. Some left nursing entirely. Some went to the PACU. Some went to the clinic. There was a large shift in ED nursing. At least I felt that was the experience I saw of a lot of nurses being like, "Yeah, I'll go, I'll go work day shift."
well, and hard to
Of
blame any
course, yeah,
single individual decision. And it really shifted the
yes,
way we do work. In 2023, the Impact Wellbeing Guide was published by the CDC and NIOSH, which was a guide for how healthcare systems and leaders can make change in professional well-being. And we started to see more of a national discussion around the sort of systems approach and systems drivers. We started to see organizations going through the Joy in Medicine program with the AMA, even integrating their sort of nurse professional well-being and physician professional well-being together. And in 2022, the foundation created our first map of states who met best practices for physician licensing. And on that first pass, we had 17 states. So from 2017 to 2022, 17 states became consistent with best practices. By doing that map and through structured outreach with our All In coalition, we've gone from 17 to 43
wow,
in the 3 years
that's
since.
awesome.
The nice thing about doing these maps, Graham, is almost the minute we create them, they're out of date. We've also added maps in nursing, pharmacy, dentistry, and for credentialing. So we have over 2,000 hospitals, health systems, clinics, freestanding ERs now who have changed their credentialing applications and peer reference forms to get rid of those
Sure.
questions as well. And we have a badge that we give those organizations. And so this has really been a sea change in how these questions are being asked. So we are seeing a cultural shift in how these questions are being asked, where they're being asked, and the calculus for healthcare workers who are deciding whether it's safe to seek care is really changing because of these shifts as well.
That's incredible. Wow. I know the Lorna Breen Healthcare Provider Protection Act just got reauthorized in February. For people who don't know about the act itself, what does the act actually speak to and do?
The Dr. Lorna Breen Healthcare Provider Protection Act, which is really first of its kind legislation funding projects and programs in hospitals and health systems that are designed to impact professional well-being. And that could be on either side, right, of that chronic uncontrolled stress or the individual coping. So from that first law that was funded through the American Rescue Act, there were 3 years of funding for hospitals, health systems to do this work. And there were 45 grantees. And then there was also the Impact Wellbeing Campaign, which was this leadership guide for hospitals and health systems and how to accelerate the pace of their work. Really great outcomes from those projects. The law itself was bipartisan because it turns out every district has a hospital,
Go
right?
go figure. Yeah, yeah.
A lot of those districts, I shouldn't say every district, many districts have a hospital, and in many of those districts, the health system is the biggest employer, right?
Oh,
And so
interesting. Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
right, well, the well-being of the healthcare workforce ends up being, because 'cause we're such a huge component of the country, like, it is
Of the
so
economy. Yeah.
fundamental to the well-being of the country and to the economy. The reauthorization in February, or as I should say, the passage of the Dr. Lorna Breen Healthcare Provider Protection Reauthorization Act extends the law for an additional 5 years.
And the Lorna Breen Foundation, what's the goal of the foundation? What are you guys trying to change, and how do you know what's working?
So the foundation has a vision of a world where seeking mental health care is universally viewed as a sign of strength for healthcare
I love
workers,
that.
and where the environment of providing care makes things better, not worse.
That sounds pretty nice.
So everything we do is working towards that vision, and we do it in really three verticals. The first is advocacy. The second vertical is in advancing collaboration. And so we do that in two ways. One is through our All In Wellbeing First for Healthcare Coalition. It's over 40 organizations, Graham, across the healthcare ecosystem. And then at an individual level, we have an ambassador group of over 400 strong individuals who care about this and want to help move the work forward. Healthcare workers, researchers,
Yeah.
leaders, surviving family members of healthcare workers who have died by suicide. And then the third vertical is this accelerating the adoption of best practices. There is such a gap between the existing body of best practices out there and the implementation of those best practices. So that's really where we're focusing, is bridging that gap and making sure that organizations have access to best practices, that there are learning collaboratives for them to participate in, and opportunities for organizations of all types to adopt best practices.
It sounds like to me part of the problem is completely solvable. It's that, many institutions just maybe either don't know how to get started or what their deficiencies are, or they're just unaware of best practices. And it's really, if we could make them more aware, help them prioritize it, put it in easy mode for them, make them feel like, hey, this hospital was able to change their credentialing questions. Here's how they did it. you know, Maybe you could learn from them that actually all of this is achievable. It's just a matter of supporting each other through the arduous healthcare processes that we know exist for bureaucracy in healthcare.
There are so many competing priorities for
Yeah.
organizations
Yeah.
to even stay afloat, right? So this needs the tiniest bit of bandwidth and then a passionate
Yeah.
champion within the organization. Once that's there, like, the change itself is very
Yes.
straightforward. It really does just require an organization saying, it's okay for us to look at what is happening across the country, say, we want to make this change too, and adopt it. And that's actually requires a little time and space for that statement to come out and to be there. And then once that statement's there, the process is really pretty straightforward.
It kind of reminds me of a type A perfectionist physician having to come to terms and not acknowledge it's okay that I maybe need some help, whether that's help with housekeeping or with anxiety or depression or any or hypertension. It takes an individual needs to do that, and an institution organization needs to come to terms with that as well.
It's almost like we're all human beings.
Go figure. It's bizarre. Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm talking to people outside of healthcare and they ask me what I do, I'll say, like, I work for a change management nonprofit that's trying to make healthcare better. And depending on who I'm talking to, right, like, they might get that
Yeah.
a lot better than having to go into the
Yeah.
nitty-gritty. It's when I used to say I'm an ER doc, like, everybody knew what I was talking
Yeah.
about 'cause it's ER or the pit and they get it, but
Yeah.
this one's a little harder to explain.
Yeah. Steph, in our last few minutes, I'm a little curious. Was there a moment 20 years ago that inspired you to really focus on this as part of your career and what you wanted to dedicate your life to?
I've always been a social science person, so I was a history major as an undergrad and, very interested in the forces that make societies and people make the choices they do, right? And I took that lens into medicine. During residency, I was really interested in the culture of safety and communication and how our teams work together. I was doing research on that. In my 4th year of residency, I was pregnant with my 2nd child, so I had 2 babies during residency. I played on expert mode.
Yes, seriously.
I was pregnant with my 2nd, child, and I caught the worst case in my career that year. In the middle of the night, a 3-year-old came in
Mm,
unresponsive, and we could not get her
yeah,
back. And so I spent the time after the resuscitation, right, caring for mom, who was the parent
sure.
on the ground there, and consoling her, and went home and gave my 3-year-old a hug
Yeah,
'cause I had a 3-year-old little girl at home. And then 6 weeks later, I received a summons to testify in the murder trial of that child, and, her mom was convicted of her
oh,
murder.
God.
So, that was a moment in my life where I had, like, my world rocked in terms of my ability to view my patients first favorably,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Uh, Without cynicism, where I experienced just this extreme conflict within myself. I also around that time developed peripartum depression, and I will say that that is self-diagnosed because I did not receive diagnosis or treatment
Yeah,
because of the concerns that we've
of
talked about
course,
today.
yeah.
And so, I was right at the beginning of my career, and I wanted to leave medicine. I was looking for ways to get out, and this, like, tension between still loving the work, right? I love my teams, I love my patients, I love the work, and just feeling like all I wanted to do was leave. I went to work part-time clinically and just looked for something else in medicine that I could do as a passion project, and what I found was the culture of safety work, and so I ended up being the hospital lead for quality and safety for my organization. This is, like, 6 months out of residency, Graham, and, and the next year, I was asked by the chief medical officer for our group, which staffed about, 30 hospitals, if I wanted to be our director for quality and safety for the group, and I said no, but I also proposed a director of patient and clinician experience role, really based on what I'd been
Yeah,
through in the past 2 years, but also my interest in that communication component, culture of safety component, right? They gave me a chance. So let me write the job description for that job because there had never been one before. And then as my group grew, and merged and acquired the history of emergency medicine over the last 15 years. I ended up doing that role as the vice president for patient and clinician experience for 26,000 physicians. And how I found the foundation was that one of my team of physician coaches was a regional medical director getting his MBA and heard our founder, Corey Feist, and he called me and said, you should really call this guy. You guys talk about this stuff the same way." And so a year after the foundation started, I was talking to the CEO and co-founder and, asking how I could help and asking him to, like, put me in wherever I could be
yeah.
helpful. So I board and then became the chief medical officer about a year and a half later.
Amazing. Well, Steph, I just want to say thank you for sharing your own story. I think all of us have some version of that. That for me, it's felt like a weird like cognitive dissonance plus emotional dissonance of like, hey, I was on this track, and then all of a sudden, whoa, I'm not sure if this did I make a big mistake? Am I on the wrong track? And I think that is really jarring. And I don't know how we help people through that without sharing these stories. So I just want to thank you again for sharing. Maybe in just our last 2 minutes, if there's a physician who is struggling in any sense of the word, what do you want them to hear?
I mean, first and foremost, I want them to hear that they're not alone. So many of your colleagues are here with you in this and are also through this, right? So there's a better
Yes,
place.
they've come out the other side. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, come out the other side. And so like you can get through this as well, but like you actually have to go through it and experience it and find that way and there is a way out the other side. So the other thing I'd like people to hear in addition to not being alone is that there are a lot of resources for you and you know in addition to the ones Graham that you mentioned at the beginning of our time together, the emotional PPE project connects clinicians with free anonymous care, and so I would encourage people to check out that resource as well. As well as there's peer support resources out there too. So we have compiled those together in our All In for Mental Health webpage. So you're worth it. You're worth taking care of, and your worth as a human being transcends and exceeds your worth as a physician or as a nurse or as a pharmacist. We're here with you, and please reach out to get help.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. Dr. Simmons, how can we learn more about the foundation and support you and the foundation's work?
We have a great website, and I like to specifically refer people to the page on the website that says "Take Action." There are 2 columns, and each column has about 12 things that people can do. Here are my top 4. Number 1, if you're passionate about this work, if you're interested in moving it forward, become an ambassador. We need people. We're a small but mighty organization. We have like 12 people working for us. So it's those 400 plus that really help us a lot. So become one of them, please. If you look at our map, and if your organization's not on that map, get it on that map. Bring your organization through the process of getting the badge. Write your representative about appropriations so that we can get the Lorna Breen Act funded and support the foundation directly. We are a philanthropically supported foundation. So in order to do our work, we do need both individual donations and organizational donations. So that's my top 4.
Well, Dr. Steph Simmons, Steph, again, thank you so much for your time today. It's really been an honor to get to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you. It was a wonderful conversation, Graham.
Thanks for joining me today. For interviews with physicians creating meaningful change, check out offcall.com/podcast. You can find How I Doctor on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll have new episodes weekly. This has been and continues to be Dr. Graham Walker. Stay well, stay inspired, and practice with purpose.